All right, so I'd like to welcome everyone to this session, and I'm not going to spend too much time on these slides because they're pretty much the same one as last time. So I'm going to just welcome Brian and Lisa to the session today. So this is eligible for CPE. So in order to be considered for CPE, you need to answer at least 3 of the 4 polling questions and be on this session for at least 50 minutes. CPE will be available 7 to 10 business days after the webinar, and we are unable to grant CPE credit in cases where technical difficulties preclude eligibility. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't signed up already, please go to feitwincities.com and sign up for our capital markets and M&A update series. It starts next week, Monday, Wednesday, and then the following week, Monday, Wednesday, 4 sessions. So I hope to see you all there. And then also on June 2nd, we're doing a business ethics class. So those of you looking for CPE ethics in our CPE credits in business ethics, there's your chance right there. That's 2 CPEs. Also, we'd love to see you at our golf outing as well. So please hop over to the website and get registered. I am going to actually turn it over to Lisa. So Lisa, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Roseanne. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And are you going to run my slides, or do I need to pull them up, share my screen?
If you can do it, that would be my preference.
Okay, not a problem. Good morning, Brian. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
All right. Just want to make sure we're all good. We're all good on our ability to our audio today. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, I can.
All right. We'll go ahead and kick things off. Thanks, Roseanne, for having us today. As you mentioned, we're one of the newest gold sponsors to FEI. We're excited to be a part of the Minnesota chapter. So eCapital Advisors is headquartered out of Minnesota, and we'll get into a little bit more about what it is our topic is today for being a hero in your business. I'm Lisa David. I'm one of the partners and owners at eCapital. I started my career in public accounting at Arthur Andersen out of the Minneapolis office. I was at Arthur Andersen up until Enron, and we were to become part of the Deloitte organization. I'd gone through one busy season with a newborn daughter and decided that was a good time to look at a career change. I was really intrigued by doing the audit experience of like how I could be more involved in process improvement with our finance organizations instead of just the auditor, which was like the cop that nobody wanted anyway. So I really was kind of intrigued about a kind of a next chapter, and have been in eCapital for the last 20 years. When I'm not working, my passions are spending time with my family. And I have 2 wonderful daughters, Amanda, who's a sophomore in the College of Business at the University of Nebraska, and Jenna, who's a junior in high school at Prior Lake High School. I graduated from the University of Northern Iowa accounting program, and I've been in Minneapolis ever since 1995. I'm a passionate college football fan. My daughters I spend a lot of time as a dance mom watching my daughters compete, both for studio and their high school, and could not be without my French Bulldog, Macy. Brian? You're on mute.
I am. Luckily, I get a message that I'm on mute, so that's wonderful for me. So I'm Brian Kalisch. I'm the outsider today. I'm actually headquartered out of Washington, D.C., where I have my own consultancy. My relationship with eCapital, which is over 3 years, is Lisa and I partner on a lot of thought leadership. So my official title is expert in residence at eCapital, but I'm also a senior executive advisor with the Noy Group in New York. And I also teach at Florida International University. So I kind of joke that, I like to summer in Minnesota, I winter in Florida, and I spend my spring and fall in DC and New York. The classic headshot is in the upper right. Lisa and I are good friends, and she knows that I'm beyond a baseball fan. I'm actually a baseball nut. So I've been to every major league ballpark that is open except for the Texas Rangers, who opened last year. And I look forward to getting down there. That picture is just, there's 4 people in uniform there, Matt Scherzer, Pat Corbin, Steven Strasburg, and somebody else. And the question is, who shouldn't be in that picture? On the the bottom center is one of the things Lisa and I do is we do roundtables here in North America, but also around the world. This was a picture of the last time I was in Dubai in the fall of 19. Just want to mention, we actually, the world's been virtual for the last 14 months. We had a virtual roundtable yesterday, but we're beginning to go live starting next month, and we'll actually have one in Minneapolis in July. I'm a big traveler. For those of you that in the bottom right, that's the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, which is one of my favorite cities to be in. And then in the upper right, as Lisa says, what else do you do with your time? The gentleman there is the former governor of Virginia. Virginia, trivia question, I believe it's the only state or commonwealth in the country where the governor can only serve one term consecutively. So that's Terry McAuliffe. He was former governor, and I'm currently working with him on his current campaign to become governor again this year. Virginia's on an off year. So it's a pleasure to be with everyone here today. I had 25 years on the corporate side. I worked in nonprofit. So I'm very familiar with FEI, and then again, it's a wonderful opportunity to be in front of you and chat with you today.
Just a little background on eCapital. Like I mentioned, we've been in business for 20 years, really helping our customers in what we call 3 different swim lanes. The performance management swim lane, which is helping them really take their Excel world to a more of a system process for their forecasting, their what if scenarios, any of their sales, revenue, profitability modeling, supply chain demand. That's really our line of business modeling. We also help our customers with their financial consolidation, month-end close, and any reporting needs. The second swim lane is really a fun one from a standpoint of, we're going to talk about today, just a lot of innovation that's been happening over the last few years in the data side, and really getting that deeper analytic insight to our finance executives. So this really includes a wide range of visualization, traditional BI products, data mapping tools, and then all the data science and advanced algorithms. It also includes our automation practice, which is becoming very, very high in demand on people, especially from the virtual workforce world, is to automate manual processes that really, didn't really add a lot of value, but they had to be done. The third area is just we have advisory services that we offer customer roadmaps, anything that they're looking at, journeys, what kind of architecture they have, current state, desired state, and then a lot of industry expertise too. Our topic for the day is three themes that Brian and I see on a weekly basis with executives that we really believe can make a modern CFO a superhero.
Lisa, can I jump in here quick with a poll?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So here's the first polling question, very easy for you. Would you like CPE for this session? I'll give everybody a couple seconds more to answer that. All right, I'm going to end that poll. And Lisa, back to you.
Thank you. Our first theme that we'd like to talk about today is what we call the speed to insight. A lot of our finance teams, even if they had a good forecast, they could not see the daily actuals that could really drive actions immediately. So it was always the analytic insight was too far delayed to really adjust in a near real-time fashion, so that they could even affect that month or the quarter that they were in. So what Brian and I have been fascinated with is working with a solution over the last 4 years that really is innovative in adding this speed to insight. I'm just going to highlight a couple local examples. So Best Buy, large retailer headquartered in Minnesota. One of the things they have very robust planning systems and lots of data. We could talk all day about all the architecture at Best Buy, and everything from their POS systems to their .com to everything kind of data warehouses that they have put in over the years. But really, I'm working with the finance leaders, and they really had some needs that weren't being met, especially in that holiday season. So their executives could not basically see every day that SKU location day information that then could drive promotions. There's outliers as far as like, what's my high sales, but I have low inventory. What is my low sales, but what's my high inventory? So all of those questions were not, just because of the architecture that had existed over the years of history and what was available, it was very, very difficult. And they have large amounts of data, but we're working with Best Buy on this solution. And then Brian and I are working with a emerging $50 million tequila company out of San Francisco with the same problems. It doesn't matter the size company, the speed to insight can really add the value. In the retail side, one of the fun things is the enablement of that superhero from the finance leader. So the CEO had a question during the holiday season last year and could go to the senior VP in finance and say, can you give me this, this from Prime Day 10/13 in these 4 categories, these vendors, exactly what our results were. Well, because of this innovation, the finance executive would have had to have taken hours to crank Excel gymnastics. They're leveraging the IBM planning solution called TM1, and they have robust models, but they do not have that level of detail to answer this question. So it would have taken hours to do that. This executive was able to answer that question to the CEO in 5 minutes. And that is why this matters, is that agility as well in that holiday season, could really affect even the promotions. We're working with another fun retailer, Duluth Trading, headquartered out of Wisconsin. And within like last year in 2020, when they had to shut down all the retail stores, we could show their executives their daily report every day. Here's what sold. The women category sold more than men. Women are shopping online more. It's tops more than bottoms. It's these fabrics, and across every state and every zip code. And then we could pair that with, like in 2020 for Duluth Trading, we could pair that with like the COVID, Johns Hopkins data, any external data. They would also give them trend lines on the states. States is something that never really was not on the high priority of analytic insight and really has emerged in the last 15 months. Yeah, just some further details on the top 10, bottom 10. The other thing that this is driving, and we'll kind of get to this as a theme too, is our finance teams have always wanted to maybe get it takes this level of granularity to really get up to what the modern forecasting of using machine level analysis too. So basically these actuals are driving what this month could look like, what the quarter could look like, because history after 2020 happened, or we call it BC, most of our customer teams were just leveraging historical results, not really the actuals that were happening. These slides we can share later, but I think Brian, I'll turn it over to you for some little context on that.
I mean, definitely, it's what we've seen is it's been, it's speed to insight at the speed of thought. And so what's really changed is that we are now in a point that we can answer any question that we want. The technology now exists. The question for individual companies was that the level of analytics that they want to provide, right? There's not a one size fits all. We all provided, descriptive and diagnostic, but then it's a question of how much do you want to get involved in predictive, prescriptive, and ultimately into cognitive. So it's organizations now, because also the price point has come down so much lower. The cloud's been fantastic. So you have the option. Then there's a question from a budget standpoint, do we have the money to spend? And then even if we have the money to spend, is the ROI there? And so it's really up to organizations. We've conquered that battle of, can we find out what's going on in the organization? It's a question of, do we want to? Are we willing to pay for it? And is the return on it high enough? And so one of the things that's always fun when we describe this technology to clients and potential clients is, and it's great to be on camera, is their arms are folded and they're shaking their head. And the reason, because I went through the same process too, as I was getting introduced to the technology, is it seems like magic. But if you think about the fact that we now live in a world of what's called brontobytes of data, 10 to the 27th power, and the fact that versus 10 years ago, where probably most of the data that we were dealing with was internal and structured, we're now dealing in a world of internal, external, structured, and unstructured. And it's just a question of how are you able to manipulate all that data? I mean, one of the things that I find is fascinating is that the vast majority of data that organizations have would be described as dark data. And the definition for that, it would be, it's data that either you don't know you have, or you have and you're not doing anything with it other than, it's in your ERP, it's from transactions. And it's interesting, Gartner had a report out recently that about 85% of all data is dark, and about 94% of unstructured data is dark. So if you look at it from just an opportunity perspective, I think that's what we're going to spend the next 5 years, is how do we leverage data to get us those better, faster, smarter decisions? Because the whole thing people forget about, data is great, but data doesn't solve a problem, right? You have to take data, convert it into information, and then make that insightful, right? It's not just information, it's information that's actionable, but then you need to transform that into knowledge that then drives a decision for the business. So we want to move from a world of doing just analysis and reporting from a finance perspective to influencing decisions and ultimately impacting the decisions that the organization's making.
And just the speed you can do that. Brian, I was meeting with a Minnesota-based company yesterday, and it was actually a finance leader she's in charge of the shared services function of the company. And just the way that her ERP system had been set up, she could not see. It's very difficult for her to get at that days sales outstanding by department. And so one of the things that I really love about the innovation that's available now to our finance teams is really that the ability to see that sub-ledger insight, because they're able to hone in and affect that working capital. So the accounts payable, the accounts receivable level, any of that sub-ledger information, she was describing like a report that it literally takes her 3 hours to generate. I mean, just from a standpoint of the innovation, that can be done in seconds. And it's just that innovation didn't exist. I mean, 10 years ago, we'd be talking about this pain with a customer, and it was like, I don't really have an easy button for you. There's no easy answer. It's very difficult. Data takes a long time to move. And then when you do move it, it has no agility, because it's like, here's what I want to see and analyze today. And that's kind of what you're stuck with. And then if Brian has a different opinion than Lisa, we got to have come to mediation and decide what that's going to be, and not both choices. So now having that single version of the truth, where you can have that top level KPI and go down to the penny, and whether that's hundreds of thousands of transactions, there is no mystery anymore of assumptive decisions on data. So there was a lot of assumptive things because they couldn't see that granular, because that top to bottom was too hard to do. And for any of you who've used cube-based technology, cubes don't do that. I mean, everybody wanted this, everybody aspires this for real drill down, as I'm describing, but it's now available, which is really exciting.
Please just add one more point. The great thing is, this is not a replacement for anything that you had. This is an add-on. This is really
it's an enhancement.
An analytics booster hub. And so we work with a global company, and they may have 50 different ERPs. We're not talking about ripping all of that out. We're basically, it's a tool to bring in your information from however many sources you have, and then leverage it at a speed that we've just never seen before. And that's because everyone's like, oh my God, I'm not going to completely reconstruct my organization. And that's what's fantastic about this is again, Lisa likes the term, an analytics booster hub, and that's truly what it is.
Yeah, one fun story to wrap up this little section before we get to the second theme that we see. I'm working another area I just wanted to highlight for the group. Anybody who's doing mergers and acquisitions, the series is coming up on M&A, but anybody who's doing M&A activity, imagine a day that you could connect the acquisition company to the existing company in such a short amount of time, so you can see that single version of the truth. There's tons of industries where M&A is a very prevalent engine, but the difficult part is integrating that data together, because they're on separate source systems, maybe separate inventory systems. Well, you don't have to just wait all those months. This hub can be used for that glue immediately, and it's just so much faster to get that information. I'm working with Brian, your love of baseball. We're working with Rawlings, the baseball and glove. They're headquartered out of St. Louis, and they just acquired the softball side of Easton. So they are now selling all the softball line as well as the baseball line. And of course, a lot of their stuff is sold through like the major sporting goods stores like Dick's Sporting Goods. But they have this hub to join the raw. The acquisition literally just was effective like in December of 2020. And they have this hub putting the Easton data and the Rawlings data together so that they can see that single version of the truth and achieve those synergies that are expected from M&A even faster. So it's really exciting to see, just because again, they can't get that Easton data onto the Rawlings ERP. It's a roadmap to do that. But if you're doing M&A, have that ability to have that data put together right away, really just adds that value. So anybody on the M&A side, it's just another huge use case to talk about. I'm going to go back to our slides quick.
And Lisa, while you're doing that, I'm going to launch the next poll.
Perfect.
So what is your main analytics pain point? Hard to access data from legacy systems, too many disconnected data sources, data accuracy concerns, no actionable insights, or no self-service? And I'll give everybody a few seconds to answer that. All right, I'm going to end the poll. And I'm going to launch the results. And maybe Lisa, you can just share those quickly. Can you see them?
I can.
Okay.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by the results of the disconnected data sources. It's very complicated. They have different strings. They have different tables, and they're sitting on different architecture. So that is, by doing this, what we just talked about, this little section, our first theme, by getting this analytics data hub booster engine, it can just get that data disciplined. It can, as I call it, unwrangle all of those disparate sources, because they happen over time. And it's very normal to have a separate CRM system, then your ERP, then your capital system, then your POS system. But having that information together really can add that insight that these executives, that's where our finance leaders can really become this entire another chapter as the business partner to the organization. Our next theme of the morning is what we call modern modeling and forecasting.
And so kind of the way that I look at it, if you think about how we've spent the last 14 months, I kind of equate it to going through a military conflict, right? So we didn't want to go through this, but what we found through history is, there's tremendous innovation because of necessity, survival oftentimes. And certainly we've seen that, it's been extraordinary what we've done on vaccines. But if we think about it in a business context and the forecasting, so I kind of think about, where were we BC before COVID, or saying the start of World War II? And, from a forecasting perspective, first of all, one of the questions that came up yesterday in one of our roundtables was, well, how often should I forecast? And my answer, and always be interesting, and again, please feel free to use the chat function for any questions or comments that you want to add. But my answer is, well, how often do you make a decision? Right. That's what your cadence of forecasting should be. So maybe before COVID, and you were forecasting once a month, and that was probably considered maybe top of class. And so the same thing. So the World War II started. We actually had biplanes. So at least you can go to the next slide. Well, then we got into the war, right? And we had, and this is really what we've seen over the last, 14 months is the beginning of the war, we had biplanes, the end of the plane. This is the Gloucester. This was the first, this is actually the only operational jet that the Allies had. But within 6 years, we had jet aircraft. And I think, the way I think of it in the sense of forecasting is maybe, that forecast that we're doing once a month, and maybe it took us 4 hours to do. So it was pretty de minimis. But if all of a sudden we had a forecast during COVID, especially like the high point maybe 6 months ago, and we were forecasting every day. So then all of a sudden that 4 hours was consuming my entire day. So there's not a lot of other work that I was doing. But what have we learned over the last 14 months? Well, there's all these fantastic tools that are out there. We have found that the way that our processes, and the fact that we basically in one day, March of 2020, the entire world went remote. And so we've found a tremendous amount of information, innovation, technological advances that have moved us forward. But what I think is, the end is in sight. And so, at the end of World War II, we didn't need all these jet fighters anymore. But what did we do? Well, we took all the innovation, the technology, lessons that we were learned, and within 4 years, de Havilland introduced the Comet. So we had the first jet airliner, and that was the genesis of the jet airline business. And I think that's where we are today, is all the lessons that we've learned is that, we can't forecast every day. But again, if we think about the fact that we probably don't have to make a decision every day as things calm down a little bit, or what we call VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, that level drops. We probably aren't going to go back to where we were, as Lisa was saying, BC before COVID. So maybe we're going to be forecasting once a week. What we did is we learned that we can forecast every day. It just takes a tremendous amount of resources. So I think as we are moving forward, we're now going to leverage our people, our process, our technology. And one of the biggest changes that I think that has occurred is culture, right? And again, for the group, how many people believed 15 months ago? So it's, go back to February or maybe December of 19, and thought that 100% of their workforce could go remote and we could function. I would argue it was very small. We've learned this. So as in the previous session, when we were talking about real estate and how people are going to use the space, I think it's one of the things we're going to figure out is, how and what's the cadence of forecast that we should be doing? Are there tools that we should be leveraging? I know we're going to touch on automation. Should we be freeing our people up from doing these low IQ activities so they can provide a higher level of value to the organization? So that's kind of what I see that's happened, again, in the last 14 months. Liz,
and thank goodness the cloud evolution happened 4 to 5. I mean, thank goodness for cloud, because we're able, now with all cloud-based technology, again, not having to have on-premise software installed in data centers on hardware, where they're reliant on an IT team, that is centralized in the office. This has really opened up a whole new chapter, and you're able to have that in a matter of weeks. Just wanted to highlight a couple customers that were like in the last 15 months, just the value. One thing you also never heard in forecasting was the key outcome of number one there. There was never a discussion about 50 different scenarios and until 2020. We might have had like 3 to 4 different versions of a forecast, but there was never 50. And now it's completely normal to have, especially during that volatility of last year, to have customers running 50 different scenarios. Meridian Brick is headquartered out of Georgia. It's a brick manufacturer. And, we work with a variety of forecasting applications. These are both just some workday solutions. And it's just their forecasting piece. But it's exciting that you can go from that liberation also of having hundreds of spreadsheets to having 50 different scenarios that are all back solved, calculated with an in-memory engine in a matter of like a few months. And just another huge area that we see that's come up in this cash forecasting. That was not really something that people did very diligently or all the time. And now we have customer teams running multiple cash forecasts all the time. Product profitability, any of those needs operationally also are able to be forecasted. I'd be curious in the group, if anybody could comment in the chat line, if anybody's actually gone to add to the machine, like adding any advanced algorithms on from like a revenue forecasting perspective as well. Just wanted to highlight a local company here, Sun Country Airlines. So if you would have told me 15 months ago that we would help an airline industry client implement a new solution in 2020, I would have told you no. Thought they were beginning to, they had hundreds of spreadsheets and needed to get that time shrunk to bring all that together as well. And of course, for those of you who keep up with Sun Country, this immensely helped them in their IPO to have this capability and all the different reports, the road shows, everything. and Sun Country just went public here in early 2021. But great local story, just to get them the reporting capabilities that are also included now in these forecasting solutions. They just liberate you to, as a finance team member, to design your own report. I was working with the CFO in Seattle, and he's doing he has hundreds of investor meetings every week, and he can like go into the platform and design his own report in a matter of minutes at 8 o'clock at night. And that's something that's really changed over 20 years in this industry of helping customers with forecasting and modeling and budgeting systems, is that they have become, they're much easier to maintain, and they have made it skilled so that I don't have to have a technical team member sitting in finance to do this. Some of the legacy on-premise technology that they just had, I mean, there was scripting, there was a lot of calculation logic. Like, I do not know how to read or write a SQL statement, and it's not in my professional roadmap. And this solutions finally liberate our finance teams. And I think we're going to, Roseanne, if you have another polling question, we're going to go into another section here.
Perfect, thank you. So this is about the forecasting methods. So how efficient are your forecasting methods? Too much ETL, slow refresh times, poor query responses, no actionable insights, or no self-service. And then Lisa, we're going to launch the next one right away too. So I'll share these results. I'll launch the next one, and then because that is on the automation piece. All right, we have several people yet to answer, so we'll give a few more seconds here. All right, 5 more seconds, and then we'll end the poll. All right.
Well, interesting, we have a little bit more of a variety percentages than we had in our first poll. Looks like our winner is too much ETL. Yeah, we see that. And again, that was just because that was what wasn't available before. And there's ways to liberate that process, as we talked about in the first section, that refresh times, again, very much optimized in the new modern solutions that are available, and then the actionable insights. And I think that the latency, I mean, a forecast doesn't really add a lot of value if you don't have it done until 2 weeks into the month. You can't really affect, I mean, that's where the actionable insights doesn't happen, is that if you're waiting on a bottoms up process to not give you even the target number until half of the month is over, it's going to be, that's what's hard to have the action insights.
Thank you. And I did launch the next poll. So what type of analytics do you generate primarily? Descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive, or cognitive self-learning? And again, if you missed a poll, just go ahead and enter something into the chat box, and I'll make sure you get the CPE. All right, I am going to give a couple more seconds, and then we'll close this. We have 17 of, there's 18 of 19 have responded. I'm going to end that, and here are your results.
Well, nice. I'm glad that I'm going to stop sharing just for a second, because we can have a little dialogue. I'd be curious if anyone's willing to share how on the predictive side. We can wait till the end too, but that's going to spike our curiosity. All right, we'll go. Brian, anything on forecasting from your side before we go to automation?
Yeah, I was going to say, so, I try to read people much smarter than myself, which isn't really hard given where the bar is set. But one of the things I think is important when we think about modeling and forecasting is, if people are familiar with the British statistician George Box, he has a famous quote, which is, "All models and forecasts are wrong, some are useful." And so I think that's important, because one of the things we actually even learned during the crisis, and Lisa alluded to it earlier, was even organizations that are that are actually leveraging artificial intelligence. And there's a pharmaceutical company that we work with, and so Belgian company headquartered North America in Atlanta, and they were actually using artificial intelligence. And as the crisis was taking place, kind of as a check-in, it's like, well, how's that working? And it said, well, we unplugged it. And you're like, really? And it's like, why? Well, because it wasn't giving us any useful information, because it was based on the time series of the last 20 years. And so the model itself wasn't providing any value, because the world that we were living in had nothing to do. You could look at the last 20 years of data. What was that telling you about next month when you were in September and October? And so you have to have the agility to be able to take, and again, the whole kind of the general thing we're saying about becoming a superhero is these pieces build upon themselves, right? So you have to have the right data analytics so that you can do the right forecasting and modeling, and then you use automation to free up the capacity to do so. But that's the whole question, is once you realize, and it's very hard, right? We put a lot of, and our staffs put a lot of time, money, and effort into building these models. And if they're not useful and they're not applicable, then we need to get rid of them and find those that do. And we need to have the technology that lets us do that, right? So if it ends up what we affectionately refer to being part of the BAS system, which is big ass spreadsheets, we all know, we've lived through it. It's very difficult to update that, making sure all your connections are correct and there's no breakage. So again, it's looking for technology that leverages today's data analytics, but in a format that is adaptable and agile and gives us the ability to pivot.
Yeah, a fascinating project in the credit union, in the financial services space, working with a credit union. One of their key things is they were representing some private label credit cards as part of their offering. And we're, from a data science perspective, Brian, once we had that data hub together, we could add like the Jupyter analytics to basically predict customers that had credit would be likely to fraud or charge-offs. And I mean, it's a massive ROI to that credit union to be able to really be early indicating, predicting what accounts would be likely to have charge-offs so that they could take action on that. On the flip side, they also on the credit card wanted to analyze in like what customers are actually using the credit card, because they were basically running marketing programs and marketing spend to everyone instead of honing in the marketing and promotions should only go to the customers actually using the credit card, not to everyone. So they actually reduced their overall marketing costs by leveraging that algorithm information on here's actually the customers using the credit card. And so it's on both sides, revenue generating and then cost savings on the marketing side as well. We will go into our next little area of topic, which is automation. Interesting one that I would have said if we were talking to having this meeting in early 2020 prior to March, we would have been showing over the years like, oh, how much is automation being talked about in corporate and with our business teams? It would have been this like slow curve, probably said, next 3 to 5 years, people will probably get around to like considering automation. And then, of course, March of 2020 happened. And we saw it's something because everybody went remote that we ended up seeing. I'm just trying to. That we saw an uptick in conversation and across multiple departments. Brian, do you want to highlight some of like that what happened in March and what continues to happen?
Sure. So, I mean, really, echoing what Lisa was saying, I mean, one of the challenges, I mean, it always made sense, right? Everyone goes, oh, automation makes sense. But the challenge was, it wasn't a burning platform, right? Because by definition, we have a process that works. It's a question of efficiency. And then the piece that really makes it difficult is a lot of times when we get engaged to do an automation project, the first thing we ask is, okay, let's see your procedures. And companies, and I would definitely put myself in there, are notoriously bad at documenting procedures, right? And so you didn't have a burning platform and you didn't have good procedures. So, you're saying, okay, let's have a project about basically getting all our procedures right. Well, what's the ROI on that? What's the level of excitement? Well, boom, March of 2020 came in and everyone realized they had to change all their processes, right? So all those systems that were dependent on someone walking from one end of the hall to the other end. I use the example, if people are familiar with the movie Office Space, where the consultants are asking the gentleman, what does he do as a job? He goes, well, I take the order from the customer and I walk it to the engineers. You're like, so you physically walk it to the engineers? They go, yeah. It's like, what if we just have the customers directly contact the engineers? And of course, the person doesn't want to lose their jobs, and they're like, well, I have people skills. But that's kind of what we're looking at. It was basically every organization that I've worked with over the last 14 months, process has been one of their number one things. So when we think about automation, and certainly there's elements to it that are scary, or people don't want to see their jobs go away, I think it's important, again, that we remain very fact-based. So I believe it was McKinsey had a study recently, and I use air quotes in this world of zooming, but McKinsey did had a research recently that 55% of finance activities can be automated, but only about 5% of the people. And so I would argue what we've seen, first of all, you also want to understand what doesn't work. So for example, Lisa could say, oh, well, Brian is the director of FP&A for my company. I like automation. I want to automate Brian's job. Well, I can tell you that's a fool's errand, right? Because you're not looking at automating people's jobs. You want to look at automating activities. And the great thing about automating activities is, even though obviously we're finance focused, but this can be across the board. It can be in manufacturing. It can be in human resources. It can be in S&OP. It can be in inventory control. And it's the whole idea. And we really love this quote. And when you want to try to get buy-in from people is, if there was a way to remove the least favorite hour of your workday and replace it with your most favorite, would you jump at it? And if we put this, Rosanna, if we put this as a poll question, I think it probably would have been about 100%. And that's what we're talking about with automation. We really want to make the argument that automation equals liberation. So, hopefully you'll enjoy this. One of the things so this is a little dynamic, but one of the things that we found in all of our work and research is that when people think about automation, they typically think of it very much as in a silo. They think about what their processes are. And I think what's really important for people to think about is like all the elements of what we would call the happy path, how you get from beginning to end, and how many different groups are involved. So I'm sure everyone's very familiar with quote to cash. If you go through the process, you can see, these are all probably elements that are very familiar to you. So at least if you want to hit the next click. So, if you think about it, and this is a real example that we had, basically how far from the customer to delivery did something like this take? And so, you see where those impacts of where we've got humans, we've got all these different apps, some are customized, some are pretty common. But what we found, again, in this case, is it took about 30 days. And so when we looked at this, we saw this as a kind of a prime example of how can we do what we would call, I call proof of concept. Lisa, you've got a better term. You have pilot. What is it?
Pilot to production. Yep.
Pilot to production. I like your term much better. So pilot production. So we saw this as a great opportunity. So when you kind of look at those spots where we, in the gray where you see the humans, is basically we put a bot side by side. And typically we're not going to replace the human. We're just going to take away from the human all those mundane, low value activities that they're doing. So Lisa, you want to go to the next slide. So you see where all the little humans are. You see where our friendly little bots pop up. And then when we actually implemented, we can show you here on the next click, how quickly the process changed, because all these bottlenecks got removed. And so again, sharing with you the real example, we took this whole process from 30 days to 5 days. So if you think about, again, being a consultant and using little catchphrases, if you think about from the 3 C's, capacity, capability, and collaboration, what we just solved here was for capacity, right? We took a process that took 30 days, got it down to 5. So we just gave you 25 days of capacity. Then it's a question of the organization. Do you have the right people with the right tools, with the right processes and the right culture to then move up the hierarchy of analytics? And then if you have those people in the right places and they have the capacity, that's when they can really, start collaborating with the business and go from, again, not just influencing decisions, but truly impacting them and really moving. And this is something I'm very passionate about, is moving finance from being perceived as a cost center to being a profit center. But you have to have the capacity to even start that. Do you want me to keep going, Lisa, or you want to jump in?
Well, I just want this. I was just building this slide up so we could talk about it, not just like it's not as cool as the bot one. So I'm just like bringing it together. But yeah, I think there's many reasons for excitement. I mean, it's like partnering the human workforce with the digital workforce. I mean, the nice thing is the accuracy is so high. Your auditors love you for this. I mean, you want to talk about people who love you is audit. I mean, this is obviously becoming a big part of the audit and tax world, as well as internal audit. We see a lot of treasury need, and then anything in that reporting category. I'll show you an example here on our next slide. But when we're partnering that with the digital side, the accuracy is high. They never take a sick day. Our productivity just increases because we really can have our resources to be spending their time on that analytical insight for the business. Just a couple local examples to highlight again. This is a new way, and actually this is a case where they first had the need for the forecasting solution, but then the next chapter was, can't we even make the reporting easier for the team? So they had, first of all, went from Excel to the forecasting solution, that our second section we just talked about on the modern modeling. And then one step further on these bots that we just showed you on the last slide is basically saving 6 employees from all of the weekly and monthly reporting due diligence that was done, so that we're fully automating the data from the systems and consumption into that performance management solution they're using and all of their business leaders. So it definitely took the process 10x. And like I said, there's nothing better than saving 6 employees from doing basically weekly and monthly just reporting due diligence. The next just local example here, Smart Care. They're a spinoff of Ecolab, and they have a lot of commercial equipment that they're doing. So there's a lot of need for their third-party portals that they've got to send their invoices to. So there's a lot of movement of data kind of external to the company. And it's like, now in their case, they saved 5 employees the need to actively be billing getting these invoices out, because they could automate the process of, here's all the I's dotted, T's crossed, and here's how they get to the invoice faster. But just wanted to highlight a couple examples for you on automation. It's one of those things that, like I said, was barely being talked about. I'd say it was surfacely being talked about 2 years ago, and now it is a weekly, daily conversation. I think our group last night, and the biggest is just really on this side of the world, when you're talking automation, one of the questions that came up last night, Brian, in our session was, how do you really make sure you enable and educate the team? Because the culture change, there is a fear of scarcity in the organization, typically, where I've done the process the same way for 20 years. Why would we change? And so it's like, you got to have that white glove approach there to really enabling and educating the organization of the value that enhancing automation with the human workforce, what it brings to the business. Anything else, Brian, on automation from your treasury?
No, like I said, I think it's it's definitely, again, like you said, I was always kind of extreme on automation, even BC before COVID, but it's only been accelerated. But it is important to realize the human element of it. I mean, this is a big culture change. So I'm a big advocate of, if people are familiar with Who Moved My Cheese. I think it's a good book or a video. I teach a class on FP&A at Florida International, and that was one of the assignments I had. And some people were very familiar with it, and some people had never seen it before, and they thought it was life-changing. And I'm in that camp. I think it's a very simple, whether you watch the video, it's about a 12-minute video or maybe a 20-minute read. but it's just a really good reminder that we live in a time of change. And first of all, you will not succeed if you are resistant to change. You'll do okay if you embrace change. But where I really see organizations thriving is if they can leverage change and actually make it a competitive advantage. Their ability to pivot and to be agile in this highly uncertain world. I mean, for those of us of a certain vintage, we've just seen the world get, more and more uncertain. I think we learned after the financial crisis, if anyone ever says, well, that will never happen, I think that's a capital offense. I think we live in a world that anything can happen. We can have a global, financial slowdown 13 years ago. We can have a global pandemic. But, part of it is, in addition to everything, it's really what I'm focused on is helping organizations create a culture for data-driven decision-making. And so it's important to remember there's just 4 pillars. It's your people, it's your processes, technology, and your culture. And you have to have all 4 of those in the proper alignment. And if you're missing any of it, you just can't get to that level that you want to be. You can spend it. I think one of the challenges, Lisa, is that people oftentimes look at technology as being the solution and not a tool. Because if you think about it, you can spend a tremendous amount of money on technology, but if no one knows how to use it, it's basically the Maserati in the garage with no gasoline, right? It's great, you spend it, and we'd see that. I mean, unfortunately, that's one of the weaknesses, that you can get companies to sign off on technology, and it's fighting them on training. They don't, it's tough for them to see where the ROI is on training. And we try to explain to them, it's like, you don't want to take an Indy. I like IndyCar racing. You don't want to send me to Indianapolis and drop me in the greatest car you built because I don't know how to drive it. And so that's really how we kind of look at it. It's like, it's fantastic that you're willing to have this spend, and it's great that companies, and that's one of the things we've actually seen over the last 14 months is actually spend is up because people have had the opportunity and the need to upgrade. But it's making sure your people have the skill set to really leverage it, and not just for today, but to be a little more aspirational and think about where you want to be in 3 and 5 years.
Yeah, and make sure you're educated, to your point, Brian, as a business leader, because sometimes, our business teams will go to their IT teams, and their answer will be like a data lake with a visualization that still does not have the data analytics mapping, insight. That's still not going to provide you that insight. That's just a modern data storage. So there's a lot of demystification that comes out, and that's our passion, is to help bring that education to our business teams. But great topic. We could talk about all 3 of these for a long time.
Yeah, the only closing comment I was going to have, and if you think about that picture from the very beginning about Dubai, is whether we're in Minneapolis, we're in Manila, Philippines, we're in Dubai, everyone's facing these challenges. And that's why organizations like FEI are so important, because the way that we learn about the challenges that we're facing, the way that we benchmark and understand where we are, is we have to have networks. So I'm a huge networker. I'm a big fan. Sounds like I'm sometimes working for LinkedIn, but I'm a power user on LinkedIn. I think it's tremendous because you don't want to build your network when you need your network. You need to build your network when you just need to expand it. And one of my favorite little stories that I'll have, and then be quiet, which is hard for me to do, is we were having a roundtable in Boston a number of years ago, and people were talking about where they were on whatever the topic was. And one gentleman at the end of the table was laughing, and everyone's like, "What's so funny?" And he goes, "I thought we were in bad shape, and then I listened to what you guys are doing, and actually we're in great shape." So that's how we kind of can benchmark where things are. It's how we learn about things. We understand the good, the bad, and the ugly about technology, and how we're hiring talent, which is I'm sure you guys do a lot on that, but finding good talent's always a challenge. But yeah, I would encourage you to be as active as possible and reach out to as many of your peers here in FEI to learn as much as you can, because the day you stop learning is the day you start dying.
Thank you, Brian. We do have a couple questions. I know
Good.
George would like to jump in, and then there's an additional one in the chat box, which I'll get to.
Okay.
Lisa, Brian, thank you so much for your comments today. I have a question for you about, obviously you've got a tremendous background with really large companies, that sort of thing. we've got FEI members that are in enterprise level companies, as well as small, medium businesses and mid-market companies. Oftentimes a small, medium business or mid-market is looking for a quick win in helping, really ramp up their forecasting capabilities, that sort of a thing, getting to that one source of data truth. Give us an example of something that a project you've done recently, kind of at that scale, if you will.
Sure. Lisa,
yeah.
you want to do Class A Azul? I'm sorry.
No, I'm going to do, I've got better ones for George in the local group here, the hometown crowd. So that, George, that's something that I really love, that again, has totally changed in the last 20 years, is that this used to only, the barrier to start was so high price tag wise, that it was only enterprise for the first 15 years. I mean, if you knew the number, like in that, so what I really love about one of the modern forecasting solutions that really is at the top of the Gartner chart, and again, Workday acquired the product 4 years ago, and then the R&D they put into it is this a Workday adaptive solution. I bet we have a specific SMB region with Workday. We're one of 4 partners in North America where we do all of their under 300 employees is how they characterize SMB. So, I mean, that's anything from 20 million to, and again, employee size is a unique one, but that's what they consider it because of their HR platform was their #1 product. And so they classify but what they do is they really make it price effective. So the same engine that a large enterprise would have to pay $200,000 a year for, or something like that, George, it's like 30,000. It's like 25, 30,000. And then an implementation phase 1 is about the same thing, 6 to 7 weeks, $30,000 to get their forecasting set up. And so we were just working with like Watkins Manufacturing, the spice manufacturer here in Minnesota. Again, they're under 300 employees. So they're here, they're local. Provation Medical, another local company, did the same product with this year, working with, so probably at a minimum of 25 to 30 of those companies went live. But like that same engine, they can have the exact same engine that Sun Country Airlines can have, but it's just a different price. They've just done a great job of mid-market pricing. And then what I always say is what's great now, George, is the fact that software and services for year 1 is less than you buying an analyst to crank Excel. And that was never the answer before. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I was making that same calculus as I was listening to your answer. So thanks, Lisa.
Yep.
Thank you. And we're going to multitask here for our last couple of minutes. I'm going to launch the last poll. It's a very easy question, so we won't need too much help with that one. And then I'm going to launch a final question at you, and then we'll go ahead and close up. So as Lisa and Brian, as you guys work with companies, what changes are you seeing in how accounting and finance departments are structured?
Well, I mean, I can swing one on the global side, but I'm a believer that everything global is local. Is that what we saw over the last 10 years with a lot of outsourcing with accounting and core finance is actually coming back in. And one of it, as Lisa was alluding to, is cost, but it's also control, right? When you were outsourcing it, you lost control of, these functions. And so I see that from automation, again, that to me is the biggest element, because when you get, and it may sound silly, but to me it's very important, which is when you tell people, I want to take the mundane parts of your job away. I don't want to take your job away. I don't want to fire you. I like you. You know my business, right? The value of humans is doing the analysis. It's not doing, bank reconciliation. And that's what I see is understanding automation can help. First of all, it's happening. So, get on the train or get left behind. But to basically move off what we've argued, you go back to old copies of CFO, hard copies of CFO magazine from 35 years ago. And what were CFOs complaining about is my finance team spends 70% of its time on data acquisition, reconciliation, verification. And until just recently, those numbers were basically the same. I think we're really in a transformational time period where we actually can turn that on its head and get our folks doing 70% of their time on the analysis and the insights and let the bots take over.
Yeah, Roseanne, I see a trend of it being more combined going forward. So kind of integrate, instead of having a silo that finance is over here and then the accounting team and controllership side is here, really having a more of a combined function to add that business partnering value. Another huge one that I prefer is when the IT or the director of IT reports to the CFO. That's a structure change that I would say because when we don't, we end up in competition again. And I see that a lot as well. I have many stories on that. I came into this industry not knowing any of those technical terms that IT people talk about, and could write a book on that chapter as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. Appreciate it. It's been a great content. For those of you looking for CPE, the credits will be released in 7 to 10 days. With that, I'm going to wish everybody a great day and sign off here. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with everyone. Be well.